Ron Frankel, founder, president, and Previs Supervisor for Proof Inc. Founded Proof Inc. in 2002 and have just been growing the business in Previs, Post-Viz, On-Set Viz ever since. Captain America for us, in addition to being the biggest project we'd ever gotten involved in, the mandate from the beginning for Marvel was really all about the third act. That was their focus, that was their concern, that was their kind of primary goal for us, was to really help them nail down the third act. And they wanted to make sure that got done early in the production process. So we came up with a workflow where we were working in conjunction with the storyboard artists, kind of divvied up all the third act work between storyboards and previs. And storyboards took a lot of the hand-to-hand combat, a lot of the dialogue scenes, and Previs took the big dynamic kind of moving parts scenes, the helicarriers flying, the explosions, the crashes, the things that are frankly, the motion that's difficult to communicate through hand-drawn storyboards, but really lends itself to Previs. So there was a discussions up front. We divvied up all that work, and storyboards took their part, Previs took our part, and there was just kind of a constant back and forth as the third act was developed, incorporating all the work together into one big edit, reviewing it with Dan DeLue and Jen Underdahl and the whole Marvel team, and obviously Anthony and Joe. Our supervisor on that project was Monty Granito, and he basically took charge of both the previs team and constructing the edit. So he was kind of ingesting all this material from the storyboards, and he was kind of the central meeting point when these meetings occurred, and then reflecting the changes back. And although it wasn't the only thing we did on Captain America, that was by far our biggest effort, was in locking down what that third act was going to be, and helping Marvel kind of really craft that story of what was going to happen during the third act and how the whole story was going to resolve. And the reason for it, which I thought was great, and I think Marvel's a fantastic client, because they really put a lot of importance on story. I mean, everyone says that. Everyone says that story is so important, but the point of the third act really becomes this climax between two people, between Captain America and Winter Soldier. So all the big action, all the massive ships, all the explosions, this is all happening. But at the end of the day, you kind of have to drill down and just find these two little characters in the belly of this massive ship and this conflict that's going on between them. So it was great to be part of that effort and help them figure out how to tell that story and not lose the essence of what was going on within the spectacle of the massive destruction that was happening. Captain America started as a previs project with a small team, literally 3 people, to start the project, start building the assets, start animating the first sequence. And as these projects go, they kind of organically grow. We start to take on more work, the sequences get bigger, we add more people to the team. We went from 3 to 5 to 8 to about 12. 12 was about our average team size. So once we really got deep into the third act, we had 12 animators, 12 previs animators working on that all at one time, embedded within Marvel's visual effects department. And once production started and they started filming, we started to transition from previs into post-viz. So those 12 artists, the previs artists, were on for about, I'd say about 12 months. But the last few months of that, we started to introduce post-viz artists, because we were starting to get plates back from editorial, and we would start to do the temp comps for the editors. So over a period of about, 3 months maybe, we transitioned where we kind of kept losing a previs artist but gaining a post-viz artist. So the team size stayed at 12, but by the time production wrapped, those 12 artists were now post-viz artists. So still some animators, but more heavily onto the 2D side. Big handful of compositors in there. As we moved towards some of the screenings, the team swelled up to as many as 16 people, but I think 16 was our maximum, and those would only be for brief periods of time while we were trying to kind of just crank out a ton of shots in time for a deadline. In terms of tools that we were using, we really went about this as kind of a hand-animated, handmade project. There really wasn't a lot that we used in terms of, we decided early on that motion capture wasn't really a tool for us on this particular project. Too much of the action was super. and that anything that we were going to get out of motion capture, we simply weren't going to be getting the essence of what these shots were about, because they were all about falcon flying or cap jumping, and none of those things were, we weren't going to be able to capture any of that on a motion capture stage. We ingest as many assets as we can from the art department. We got a lot of assets from ILM because they had worked on the Avengers, so they gave us the helicarrier, the Quinjet. As much, we always like to take in as much material as we can that is existing. I mean, might as well work with the assets that they have, and since Captain America is part of a larger kind of universe of Marvel films, a lot of that material exists. So we took what they had, and then of course every film kind of redesigns it a little bit and puts their twist on it. So as the art department came out with new designs, we would simply incorporate those as they came out of the art department into the work we were doing. So we never had, for instance, one Quinjet. Our Quinjet was kind of a constant state of evolution until the art department locked it down. The biggest innovation that we kind of brought to this project was the use of our real-time tune shader. So early on, Marvel requested that we do the Previs in black and white. And that request was motivated by their desire to put together a story reel that combined storyboards, 2D animatics, and Previs. And they didn't want to have a big kind of jarring cuts between full-color Previs and the hand-drawn storyboards. So the idea was, if we limit the color palette of the Previs to black and white, then all these things can kind of commingle visually in a more pleasing way. We experimented with a few different styles of creating black and white Previs. The first was just to do regular full color Previs and desaturate it as a post-process using After Effects. But it looked really washed out, didn't look good at all. And we had been, as a side, we had been experimenting on a few projects with a more kind of illustrated, kind of tune-shaded look to Previs. So we decided to see if we could actually apply that to the Captain America Previs in order to create a black and white look. And what we came up with was actually something that was, had a very simple color palette, very desaturated. All the backgrounds are basically kind of black and white and gray. But we were able to use the tune shader to introduce kind of subtle variations in color. So Cap is a little bit blue, his shield has some red in it. Explosions would have some yellow. So it has a little bit more of a graphic novel feel. And the Previs ends up looking really compelling, has a really great kind of visual feel to it, but it doesn't have all the kind of color, texture, detail that you've come to kind of see in a lot of contemporary Previs. And I think that really played to the benefit, because what we were trying to help them figure out was story and blocking and action and pacing. And by going with this really kind of simplified look that was still very compelling and interesting, it really focused everyone's eyes on the action, what was happening, who was doing what, where were they in frame. And it really kind of distilled it down to some of the basic components, rather than getting too involved in color, texture, atmosphere, mood, lighting, which aren't really the domain of Previs. That stuff's going to be worked out on set. We got to really focus on kind of the basic essentials of what it was that they needed to figure out on this project. Honestly, the most challenging aspect of the project was the quality, the detail that Marvel was looking for. They have an incredibly high quality bar, and they demand, they demand your best on every day, every hour of every day, which is great. I mean, it's a fantastic challenge to rise to as an artist. I think, Monty, the supervisor on the show, and all the artists, really kind of enjoyed stepping up to that challenge and working with a client who is kind of that actively involved and that actively engaged, and frankly has, expectations that are that high. It kind of raises everybody's game. And keeping up the intensity of that work for the length of time that we were on the show really ended up being a challenge, and kind of finding ways for people to kind of have a little bit of downtime, not get too burnt out, balance the demands of work. Obviously, they have lives outside of what they're doing every day. So from my point of view, from a management point of view, there was a lot of effort put into making sure that everyone was kind of happy, comfortable, working at their best every day.